Welcome to Author Quick Draw. This is your permission slip to take a quick break from the hecticness of your newsfeed and hang out with me, Annie Bucknall, freelance feature writer and women's fiction author, as I get to spend some time playing Pictionary, giving away prizes and having fun with some of Australia's best loved authors. Now, we know that your favourite authors can tell incredible page-turning stories, but can they draw? We're about to find out live now in 3, 2, 1, go. Hello, everybody. Belinda's already shaking her head. A big welcome to Kate Forsyth and Belinda Murrell joining us here tonight. Belinda, I'm guessing you're saying that you can't draw.
Oh, hopeless drawer. I wish I could draw. I'm so jealous of artists, people who can draw.
You mean like Charlotte Waring Atkinson, who illustrated her own cover?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Those genes didn't come down in the family, unfortunately. Not to me, anyway.
Yeah.
They're gorgeous, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely stunning. This book is the one that Belinda and her sister Kate have written together. So it is about their literary ancestor, Charlotte Waring Atkinson. So both Kate and Belinda are two of Australia's most treasured novelists, both writers of children's and adults fiction, and their joint collaboration on Searching for Charlotte is a celebration of Charlotte Waring Atkinson, who was Australia's first children's book author, and a moving exploration of familial love. I found it very, very touching. And it just has this gorgeous cover, which, as I said, Charlotte actually illustrated her own cover, unbeknownst to her. It's from her sketchbook. Give us a like if you think this is as stunning as I do. And Kate's holding up some pictures. She was just a brilliant artist, all-round talented woman, and I can't wait to get chatting about her tonight. So guys, if you can hear us well, give us a like, give us a comment and let us know where you're watching from tonight. And if you are planning on giving a book for Christmas, I'm really interested because this is a really good one to give out. And that's my favorite thing to get for Christmas is the books. And if you're aware, obviously COVID has impacted the Australian author industry hard. There's more people reading than ever and more books being sold than ever. Well, I don't know if there's more books being sold there, but there's lots of people reading. But author engagements, which are things like speaking tours and things like that authors normally do to promote new works, even talks at schools, all of that stuff has really had the brakes put on it. And that's why you see a lot of authors getting online, sharing their time so generously at the moment, like Kate and Belinda are, and really trying to connect with their readers any way they can. So if you'd like to support us tonight, feel free to share the live stream so that your friends and family can learn more about Kate and Belinda's book, or get out and buy a copy for someone for Christmas and you really won't regret it. It's just wonderful. So tonight it's our first time having two guests on this show. So Author Quick Draw is all about us having a chat about, I know, right? You're my guinea pigs, so that's very brave of you. So Author Quick Draw is all about us playing a little bit of Pictionary and having some fun while we chat about Kate and Belinda's book. So once they finish actually drawing, we'll hold it up to the camera. And we've got two books to give away tonight. So it'll be two lucky viewers who's going to have a copy of this sent home to them. All right. So Kate and Belinda, can you tell us a little bit, for people who don't know, who is Charlotte Waring Atkinson and why is she important? Why should we know about her?
Well, Charlotte Waring Atkinson is our great-great-great-great-grandmother, and we are sisters. And Charlotte Waring Atkinson is the author of the first published children's book in Australia. And next year is the 180th anniversary of the publication of her book. So Belinda and I, being sisters and both of us being writers, how many books have we published between us, honey bun?
80?
I think is it 80? Yeah, 80.
It's
and
80.
If you add in our brother, I know, 80 books. And if you add in our brother, who's also an internationally published author, we published more than 90 books between the three of us. So we thought...
That's insane.
I know. So we thought that with the anniversary coming up, that we should write a book about our brilliant ancestor. And it's been a pretty full-on couple of years, hasn't it been?
3 years. It's been amazing. 3 years. Joyous and tough.
3 years is a very long time to be researching and writing a book, but something as in-depth as this, that, there was so much source material for you to cover and you needed to figure out how to do that in a way that was going to, have your vein of creative storytelling through it and really pull us along on that journey and help us connect with the stories that you grew up on. So, you know, you mentioned that your brothers are writers too. The three of you have you've written over 90 books together, which I'm imagining that if it was my family, there'd be a sibling rivalry race to get to the 100th book, but yep, that would just be us. So you've obviously got this you've obviously got this talent and this prolific ability to, you know, to be creative. And you do talk about some of that coming from, you know, the way you were raised as well. So there's that kind of understanding. But do you think, what's your opinion? Do you think that there is a storytelling gene? You know, is it in your blood? Is it nature or nurture? Where do you think it comes from?
It's so hard to know, because we always joke that writing is in our blood, and my children believe that writing is in their blood as well, and so do Kate's kids. And but I don't know. It's I know we were brought up in a book mad house, so we were brought up with lots of books, and we were also encouraged to write from a really young age. So my mum always used to get us to write poems and plays and stories and novels, and we used to publish them and act them out. And so we were brought up in this incredibly imaginative, creative childhood and house and family. And we also knew that our ancestors had written books. So for us, it was kind of not a strange thing. It was not something that we thought, oh, we could never do that. We actually just thought, oh, that's, you know, that's what we do. That's what our family does.
Yeah, you know, scientists have been fascinated by this question for a long, long time. And so we've actually had a lot of scientific investigation of whether creativity is inheritable, whether there's a gene for creativity. And pretty much the scientists have you know, agreed that, yes, there absolutely is. Just as your beautiful blonde hair and Belinda's beautiful blonde hair and my dark hair is predestined by birth, so too are so much of our personalities. But as Belinda said, you know, it's not just what you inherit, it's what you do with it. And it's how, you know, because we were brought up in such a nurturing environment, and our imaginations were, you know, stimulated and encouraged. And our, you know, I always like to say we were given permission to dream, because we knew that there were so many other women in our writers. Charlotte Waring Atkinson is just one of the writers in our family. We actually come from a you know, a long line of poets and novelists and hymn writers and biographers. You know, there's been many other writers. In actual fact, our great aunt, Louisa Atkinson, was the first Australian-born female novelist in this country. So, you know, wow. I think that, you know, music runs in family.
Of course, yeah.
Football ability runs in families clearly as well. I do think that we were lucky enough to inherit a love of words, a love of storytelling, because our family are big storytellers.
Never let the truth get in the way of a good story. That's our family motto.
Family motto.
I love it.
Yeah, so, you know, I think that, you know, we, you know, growing up, we just did our best. We were writing stories all the time, poems and stories, novels, and yeah, I think that it's kind of in the blood.
A little bit of, yeah, absolutely. And, you know, Kate, you do a lot of work as like writing, coaching and teaching writing and that sort of thing too. So, and I'm hearing you say that, you know, a lot of this was, you know, it was in the blood, but it was also the belief and the understanding that you could do it, that it was possible. You know, maybe having that open mind to this not being, you weren't breaking a mold by becoming a writer. You weren't defying you know, a long line of doctors to go and do something creative. Although you do actually have that in your blood as well, the scientific bent, which is probably adds a lot of depth to both of your work. But, you know, like there must be that whole feeling too that writing is a skill that you were confident enough to muster and actually work very hard at too.
I do think that learning your craft is so important if you want to be a writer. I think that, you know, reading as much as you can, listening to writers speak, practicing your craft by actually writing, because I can't tell you how often people say to me, oh, I really want to be a writer too. I really want to write this novel. I'm going, that's wonderful. How many words have you written? They go, oh, well, none.
I just thought about it.
Yeah. So I think what you need is it's an enormous amount of faith in yourself and in the importance of your story. And then this kind of steadfastness where you just bring yourself to your story as often as you can, and you just slowly let the story grow. Books can't be written in a rush. It's a slow process, as we know.
This book definitely was. It took us, as I said, 3 years. And I think we both thought that because we were used to writing our own books, I think we thought because we were both working together, it would take half the time. That actually took about 3 times the time.
So yeah, because you both came at your own processes and the research. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, the research was so huge.
And the discoveries that you did. When you look through, obviously you had this. So for viewers who haven't read Searching for Charlotte yet, which it is just a great read to pick up. Charlotte had a lot of interesting experiences moving out to Australia, and there's just so many things that happened to her. And Kate and Belinda talk in the book about growing up on these stories, and some of them being maybe exaggerated tales, or but they had to then go through and find the truth in the threads of the actual stories. So, which of these amazing things that happened to Charlotte, and I don't want to spoil or give too many away, but of all the things that you researched when you went back and you tried to inhabit her shoes to actually write, some of this, I guess, almost from her perspective or get inside her mind, what were the events for each of you that really impacted you the most emotionally?
Oh, it's a big question.
Oh, well, it depends if it's positive or negative, because some of the early stories where, for example, when she met the love of her life, James, on the boat coming out, it was so romantic and beautiful. And we did think, we grew up on these stories, and I think as we became cynical teenagers, we thought, oh, that will never be true, or it's way too romantic to be real. But then when we read Charlotte's journal, we discovered that actually it did happen that way, that, she was all alone. She was leaving her country, for her family behind her forever, going on the boat out to be governess to the MacArthur family, and she's all alone on the boat. It's all in chaos, and then this handsome young man walks up the gangplank and tips his hat to her, which was very risque in those days. And more importantly, just a few days later, he tenderly wrapped her in his plaid cloak, which was a sign of great love. And it was love at first sight. So they were engaged within 3 weeks of being on the boat. And so I love those stories. But the things I think that made me perhaps most emotionally impacted on me were the thought that she had to fight to save her children. And I think, if anyone tried to take my children away from me, I would fight like a tiger too. In fact, I'm pretty damn sure that no one would take my kids away from me. And also later on, when her beautiful daughter Emily, and my daughter's called Emily after Emily, and she was only 24, and she was married, and she died in childbirth. And the grief I felt when she died was like she was my own daughter. So I think it was I loved the romantic elements of the story, but actually the grief that she dealt with, I really, really affected me when we were researching the story. In fact, I found myself crying often when I was reading the obituaries or reading Charlotte's account of what happened, and thinking, oh, what mother should have to go through that?
I remember there was one night when Belinda and her husband Rob, came round here for dinner, and Belinda was telling me something she discovered, and Belinda and I are crying at the dinner table. And my husband said, but hang on, like, this is your great, 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 great grandmother. This is like 6 generations ago. How can you be crying about something that happened 180 years ago? And Belinda and I were saying, but Charlotte, our imaginations for so long. She was a living woman to us, and we felt so connected to her, and we, of course we grieved for her. And Annie, as well as I do, that you can read a book and I don't know, it moves you, it makes you cry. That's the power of storytelling, is to make you feel something so strongly. And so, of course, we felt that when we were writing the story. So moving.
And I think that's the thing too. If you're not feeling it when you're writing it, the reader's not going to feel it when they're reading it. And I certainly did feel that at that moment where she's having to, without going into the story too much, but like Charlotte gets to a point where she's legally having to fight for the right to retain her, the legal rights to raise her own children. And it's in a time where women are literally just legally considered their husband's property. She pretty much has no rights, and the things that she has to go through in order to have this fight and to not be separated from her kids when she's already widowed from the love of her life. I was, I have a 2-year-old son, and I was choked up reading that. So I really felt that. So I was thinking as I'm reading this, wow, Belinda and Kate must have really felt these moments as mothers themselves, because your daughters are very present in this movie too.
Yes, we went. We had this amazing overseas trip where Belinda and I took our daughters with us. We were in the UK for almost a month. So Belinda's daughter Emily was 21, and my daughter Ella was 15, and it was just. Honestly, it was one of my life's peak experiences.
It was wonderful.
So wonderful. And traveling with our daughters, it really made us think a lot about what it must have been like, for Charlotte as a young woman. She had to go out and work as a governess when she was only 15 years old. I mean, such a child still. My daughter was 15 at that time, and I found it incredibly poignant, incredibly moving to think of our ancestor living on the verges of someone else's life. It was just like a Bronte novel is what I kept thinking. That was a really moving experience for me, and I think probably the most joyous part of the whole book.
It really changed everything for me. So we'd been working on the book for a year. We'd been just buried in this research, and it was so overwhelming, and I got lost down rabbit holes for weeks at a time thinking, is this relevant or not? What do we need? What are we looking for even? And then we went on this journey, and suddenly we felt like we were walking in Charlotte's footsteps. So suddenly everything just made sense, and we could see how she must, because we'd spent so much time knowing what happened in her life, and then suddenly we could feel it. We could walk in her shoes, think, oh, she must have felt this at that point, or she must have imagined this, and suddenly it all came alive for us. And to me, that was a real turning point in our research for the book, was actually being there in England, walking in her footsteps and visiting the places that had been where she'd lived, where she'd worked, where she'd said goodbye to her family forever, where she'd met the love of her life. And it all became very real for us then.
Yeah, absolutely. And what did it mean to you and maybe even your girls to go on this trip and share Charlotte's journey? Did you see that connection with the next generation now by going on that trip and sharing the experiences together and having them involved in the research?
It was like we were on a kind of detective hunt. And so, we were searching for all these things, these facts and this, this color about Charlotte's life. And we would go to, our ancestors' old church where Charlotte or her husband James's parents and grandparents were buried, and we wanted to find their grave. And the girls are running around in the pouring rain, leaping over gravestones and searching for their names everywhere, and then getting incredibly excited when we found them, cleaning out all the mud and dirt out of the letters so that we could read their names. Just being totally fascinated by the hunt, just as we were.
Absolutely. And we also got to share with them this literary pilgrimage that we did, which both of us have always loved doing this. But it's always been a lifelong dream of mine to go to Jane Austen's house in Chawton. And so Kate and I were talking about this, like adding this elements of this literary pilgrimage to our trip. And of course, Charlotte was born halfway between Jane Austen and Charlotte Bronte. And so we wanted to sort of have this literary pilgrimage to see some of the writers that were important at the time of Charlotte's life. And so we went to Jane Austen's house, and Kate and I were both in tears, and the kids were there just sort of enjoying it as much as we were. So that was a really great thing to do. And then we went up to Yorkshire, and we went to Haworth Parsonage and visited the Brontes' home. And, the girls just were so excited to be there. They were. And I think for Ella, she was Emily's 21 and studying literature at uni, so she was as excited as we were. And Ella was a bit, Jane Austen, not so sure. And by the end of it, she's
Yeah.
reading Pride and Prejudice as happily as any of us.
You really do. I visited Jane Austen's grave site, like and the church that she was buried at a few years back on a bit of a family trip. But you really do feel like in some of these places that you go to, and I always find myself being drawn to literary landmarks and significant places from novels or from where authors have lived. But it's like you can reach the essence of that author, or like you almost feel like they're there. So you must have really had that when you were walking through Charlotte's footsteps.
Absolutely, we did. Absolutely. In fact, a couple of years ago, we went to Oldbury, which we'd always visited as children, but we used to peer through the hedges, and it was like this fairy tale castle we could never reach. And we were lucky enough to be invited to the home a few years ago. And I can remember parking the car down in the paddock and walking up across the lawn towards the house. And I just broke down in tears. I was walking with Kate, and she was going, "It's okay, it's okay." And I'm going, "Oh, I just can't believe we're here." It was so special to sort of, you have this really strong sense of ancestral memory that places that are really important that you've heard about your whole life, or that you know that for some reason are important to your family. And when you go there, you just have this incredible feeling of belonging and just being so thrilled to be there.
I always feel
that's a.
Sorry.
Go ahead, please. No, you're right.
I always feel that a story is like a big magnifying glass, so that when you're somewhere and you know what's happened there in the past, or you've heard stories about it, or you've read about it, it brings everything into really sharp focus. It imbues the whole landscape with a kind of meaning. And that, to me, is such an extraordinary feeling. And that's what we were like the whole time that we were traveling in Charlotte's footsteps. We felt that the whole landscape of her stories were so sharp and so clear and so real to us. It brought the past very close.
It did.
And the past and the places. And I guess that's a good segue to a question I felt really that was very important to ask, because you do spend a fair bit of the book talking about that. So this story is set in colonial Australia, and Charlotte Waring Atkinson has come out as a governess and is making her life here with James, and they're building a homestead, and they're doing that on ancient Indigenous land. And these people feel that the connection that we're talking about, that's what they feel with their land. Yeah. And I think that's what I'm starting to understand now as well, is like they have these stories, and it is their ancestral home, and those feelings that I feel sometimes when I'm tracing my own family's history or finding places that we've lived. That's how Indigenous people feel. Both Charlotte and James seem to be quite progressive in their attitude towards Aboriginal displacement and suffering. Yet they're still the beneficiaries of colonisation, and at times, and you touched on that, I think, in one of your chapters, Kate, their language got a bit derogatory and in their writings, and it was uncomfortable reading. How did you reconcile these incongruences in them being progressive and open and empathetic and having a good relationship with the Indigenous culture, but at the same time still being of a time where the way that they're speaking is really not comfortable for us to read today?
No, that's right. I think if we read any accounts of First Nation peoples from, the point of view of the colonizers, today we are appalled by their language and their attitudes, and it almost seems impossible that anyone could have had those beliefs in the past, but they did. And systemic racism is so inbuilt into our culture. I think I felt it was really important to examine that and acknowledge that we are the descendants of colonists, and so part of the challenge for me was finding a way to understand that, but also it was really eye-opening for me when I first read A Mother's Offering to Her Children when I was a young woman. I was really taken aback by the attitudes of the past, and of course now that I've studied literature and you read the work of so many different writers, I like to think, well, it's really important to know how far we've come, how much we've learnt, and also to acknowledge that we have to go so much so much further still to go. And I really hope a book like Searching for Charlotte really illuminates for younger readers who don't perhaps understand how far we've come, how different attitudes were back there. I'm hoping it will help them look to the future and work even harder to that in 200 years' time, people look back at us and say, well, you know, they tried, they worked hard to make things better.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that's the beauty of the book, is that it does examine those things, and it is unflinching, and it is, you know, really honest in, you know, and you're honest in your own, when you're in the book, you talk about your own opinions on and you both talk about different experiences that you've had with First Nation cultures and how important that's been in raising your children, and the values and beliefs and things that you've wanted to teach your kids. So I think it was really important to still acknowledge that, you know, there was, that things weren't perfect, and you know, there certainly was some difficulties in how, you know, Albury and things was established, but again, we have actually come so very far. And it was interesting too when you found out the rumor that perhaps James had been involved in a massacre, and were absolutely appalled, and then that too turned out to be, you know, something that was thankfully quite unfounded. So it's just such a complex history which you really dive into in the book too. So we might just go to some comments, because there's lots of comments coming through. While have you finished your drawings too, by the way?
Just
I'm pretty close to. Oh, yours is really good. Mine's too much worse than yours. She can draw.
There's a bit of normal sizzling writing happening there. Tracy Anderson has said that she loves the pictures from the book and from Charlotte's sketchbook. D.A. Kelly says that you have the same eyes.
But different colours. Belinda's a brown and mine are green.
Tracy has an interesting question. She wants to know if a mother's offering to her children is actually available anywhere.
Yeah, it's easily available online now. So it's been digitised. So all you have to do is search for it. And if you have a look in the book, in the back of our book, the link is actually included there. So if you want to read a first edition, though, honey bun, I'm really, really sorry. It's, you know, there's only about half a dozen copies left in the world, and I think they're worth about $75,000 now.
It's on for sale at the moment, you know.
I know. I got sent the link this week.
Yeah, so did I.
So we're going to have a crowdfunding campaign.
Ship in the money so we can buy a copy.
$75,000 so we can afford to buy our ancestors' book.
Isn't that nice?
Oh, isn't that funny that you have to go and purchase a copy? But obviously, you know, you don't. We've got the charm bracelet. You haven't had the actual book handed down. Jem wants to know how she gets into that gene pool, and Lou is saying that she wishes her family tree had that history.
It probably does.
It probably does. You know, everyone says that to us, and the thing is that everyone's family is fascinating. There's so much history, and you know, our ancestors are like microcosms for the past. And so when we research and we learn about our ancestors' stories, it illuminates the past in a way that nothing else can. We're just lucky enough that our ancestors wrote books.
Yep. So
and
there's a record.
There's a record, which made it much easier for us. But Lou, I promise you, search up your own family's history. Ask your grandparents or your aunts or your parents. Listen to the stories because they're amazing.
They are amazing.
Oral history is amazing.
I've been fascinated because we've been contacted, Kate and I have both been contacted by numerous people who read the book and then discovered a little story about their ancestors, not related to us, but, you know, it might have been someone who worked at Albury or who knew that. So someone related to the Lethbridge Kings emailed me this week, and they were just so thrilled to discover a reference to that they could go, oh, this is where my family fitted into this colonial history. It was, it's been amazing to see how many people have actually discovered one of their ancestors in our book.
Colonial Sydney was very small.
It was very small.
That's really cool. That's so cool. So yeah, I guess, you know, it would be a fascinating exercise to dig up the family tree and go and do a trip like that. That does sound fun. Whether or not you find novelists in your background or not, there's bound to be some good stories, I reckon. So who's going to go first with holding up their picture? Belinda, has to be you, I think, this time.
All right. I'm the youngest, so I go first this time.
Okay, fair enough.
Am I allowed to give a clue?
Okay, in a little bit. Yes, absolutely. Okay, keep scrolling across. Yep. And then can you come in closer so you can see the person?
Yeah. So this was my favorite movie when I was a little girl. If you want a clue. Okay.
All right, guys.
Guys.
Start guessing. I'm thinking that you might know what that one is. That's a very good drawing, Kate. You've done really well.
It is good. I think it's good.
Thank you. You're so kind.
Okay, Jen McCusker wants to know if it's Cinderella.
Oh, yes! Well done.
All right. Well done.
Okay, me? All right. So
it is. Okay.
So we have.
All right, we just had a bit of a connection issue. So it is Cinderella? Yep.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right.
And this is me. It's not Cinderella. So we have two people here in front of a big house.
Oh, I think I know what that one is.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about it. So that's a clue.
Okay, guys.
Come on, someone must be able to guess it.
That's actually very good, Belinda. I can tell who that is just by looking at it.
She was good.
Yeah. Okay, Jem again. Jem wants to know if it's Pride and Prejudice.
I was a few clues there.
Tracy guessed Pride and Prejudice as well, but just beat to the price. You guys did so well. Those are great drawings. I don't know what you're talking about. You definitely can draw. I couldn't do anything like that. Well, actually I do. Considering you were interviewed and doing that at the same time, you might have drawing in your DNA too. Who knows?
Not enough practice though. Might have the gene, but we haven't been
okay, so just to wrap it up. Yeah, fair enough. You needed a good governess to teach you how to do it. So just to wrap it up, I'm just wanting to know from just two writing questions. I could keep you busy with writing questions all night, but that's not why we're here. The first thing I want to know was, what was the biggest challenge in co-authoring a book? So you said that it took double the amount of time than normal. Yeah. What were the challenges there?
Well, I think Kate and I were very clever, just being very humble, of course, but in the way that we did it, in that from the very beginning, we decided that we're sisters and that we weren't going to let this come between us. So it was really important to us that we maintained our good relationship. So we actually came together and we decided that we would write different chapters in our own voices, and then we would divvy up, and then we got the choice of what chapters we wanted to write. So I got to go first and I chose one chapter, and then Kate chose another chapter, and we divvied it up that way fairly equitably. And we also decided that we wouldn't interfere in each other's writing. So there might have been times where I would have gone, well, I wouldn't have written it that way. Or Kate might have come and said, well, I wouldn't have written it that way. But that wasn't the point. The point was that we wrote our own chapters the way we wanted to write them, in our own voices, our own authentic voices. If Kate wrote something, because we both have this little thing with dates sometimes where we transpose the dates.
I do. And Linda's being polite. It's me that does it. I'm always like, if it's 1863, I will write 1836 again and again and again. I think I've got dyscalculia because, numbers and me do not. So Belinda would just very, very kindly
correct the date. Nothing else. If it was a factual thing, don't forget this or whatever. But we didn't interfere in the way we wrote each other's books.
No.
We were very careful about that. And the other thing we did, which I thought was very clever, was we decided to use our editor at the National Library as a bit like a referee, where if she said, "Ooh, cut that out," then we'd go, okay. And sometimes she'd come down on my side and go, yep, no, we'll do that. And sometimes she'd come down on Kate's side. So we just let her decide if there was a slight difference of opinion between us. So, but it's so funny because we've done so many interviews together in the last month, and everyone said, "Are you still talking to each other? Or did you have any big fights?" And we kind of had disagreements, but actually, on the whole, not. But I think that's because we both had similar backgrounds. We both worked as journalists. We both know how to research. We both have worked writing historical novels. So we both had similar, and we've both written so many books that we weren't going to get prima donna-ish about insisting that our wrong things should be in there.
I also think that, we really trust each other. I think when you're working on a collaborative project, there has to be an enormous amount of trust and faith in each other. And because, we have both, Belinda and I have made our living from our writing since we left school, essentially. So, we're very professional. We're very reliable when it came to actually, doing the work that had to be done. And because we were working on our own chapters, if I was really busy and I wasn't able to work for a little while, it didn't matter because Belinda wasn't waiting for me or wasn't carrying an unfair load, and vice versa. We each did our own work in our own time, and so that meant that it didn't matter what was going on in our lives. We weren't sitting around waiting for the other person. We were just able to keep on working at our own pace. So we were really smart when we didn't know that we were really smart till later.
Yeah. And we also lived close together, so we would walk nearly every day and we'd talk about the book constantly. So we were kind of living and breathing it 24/7 for 3 years. And that was really great because, and I think if we hadn't been sisters, perhaps that might have been a more difficult thing to do. And yeah, so anyway, I think that...
But you were doing this while you were writing your own novels too.
But we both took a break in our publishing schedule. So both of us had novels that were due to our normal publishers, Penguin Random House, and we both had to push those out by years. And so... which was kind of tough because we don't like doing that. But anyway, it just took much longer than we thought, and we just had to kind of deal with that. So that was the biggest challenge, not in co-authoring the book. That was the biggest challenge in writing the book.
Absolutely, and also trying to juggle real life and the creative life is always difficult. And we had a lot going on in our lives, in our personal lives, that was very challenging, that we didn't expect. And so that, I think, was probably the biggest challenge as well. Just dealing with things that were going on in our families and our private lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And because you're part of a family, you're both experiencing and feeling those things too. So that's it's hitting you both probably at similar times.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But once again, we were lucky because we were doing this with us, with each other, and so a crisis for one was a crisis for the other, and so we were dealing with the crises together. It was
That would be the benefit of having a sister in that moment rather than just a co-author, I suppose. So when you're writing, you both write historical fiction and you talk about getting mired in the research and sometimes going down rabbit holes and all those sorts of things. What I'm curious about, because I'm doing my own historical research at the moment, and one thing I've found difficult, just to be honest, is I have a degree in history, but, when you do a history degree, you write essays and things like that. And the amount of content you have to gather for a history essay is nothing compared to the amount you need to put together a catalogue for a novel. So when you're working out, something of this length or even larger, how do you what's your system for putting all that information together so that you can pull it out when you're actually starting to draft? Do you use index cards? Have you got a digital system, spreadsheets? What do you do?
It's a really, really good question, and it's one that we get asked a lot as well. Both Belinda and I are very experienced researchers because, we've written so many historical novels before. The very best advice that I can give you is to be highly organised. It doesn't matter what system you use as long as you have a system. Both Belinda and I are notebookers, which means that, we take notes in our notebooks and then we have a record. A couple of pieces of advice is just make meticulous notes.
Yep.
So, for example, if I'm examining a book, I always make sure that I have the title of the book, the author, and the publication date, because different editions can be different. And then I keep a record of page numbers, and I just take meticulous notes while I'm reading it, so I can go back and revisit it again. But if I need to find something, I know where to go to it. If I'm researching online, I don't just, Google away and then read. I'm taking notes the whole time. Keep a bibliography. And, honestly, if you start and keep the bibliography the whole way through, it's much easier when you come to the end. I mean, if you look at our bibliography, it's pages long.
Absolutely.
Another piece of advice is about the rabbit holes of research. A lot of people will say to you, don't get trapped falling down the rabbit holes. But that's not our advice at all. Because sometimes... Yeah, because sometimes you don't know what you're looking for. And you follow, like I say, it's like following a trail of breadcrumbs into a dark and tangled forest. You just follow that trail as long as it can lead you until eventually it runs out, because you can make the most astonishing discoveries that you didn't know were there. But it takes time, so you can't rush the research.
You can't, and you don't know what you're looking for, as Kate said. So sometimes you'd read something and it was only maybe months later that you'd go, oh, that is a missing piece that I need here. And so you've got to be able to find it again, and that can be really tricky. Or I remember there was one going through the editing process, and the proofreader queried one of my stats, and she said, well, where did you get this from? And I'm thinking, oh, where did I get it from? And I had to go back and, like it was just one tiny detail out of thousands or millions of them that you then had to produce months and months later. So it is meticulous note-taking, and I had folders of photocopies and highlighted bits so that I had stuff that I could refer to in sort of chunks of Charlotte's life, when she was a governess, when she was a child, and I had all this stuff kind of referenced in a chronological order. So I just had about 5 systems going at once, which is not very efficient, but it actually worked.
I'm curious.
Just being really methodical.
Keep going. I'm just laughing at that.
And just focusing on one task at a time, so that you don't get too overwhelmed. I think that's a good piece of advice as well.
I think one of the hardest parts was when we had access to the National Library archives, but we only had a limited time. And Kate and I were there from the crack of dawn until they turned the lights off at night time. And there were dozens and dozens and dozens of boxes. And Kate and I are writing, and you're only allowed pencils, and you're only allowed a notebook, and you're not allowed, and we're trying to take photos of stuff, and we were working so fast. It was really hard to actually remember to, write the box number, write the folder number, write the page number, and keep a track of that. But we needed to go back later and actually confirm where we got this information from. So we had to be constantly reminding each other, did you get the folder number? Did you get the box number? And so that was because of that being down in Canberra, not in Sydney, where you could go back and double check if you forgot something. That was a lot of pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering too, so Belinda has actually written a novel that it talks about Charlotte Elizabeth, who is the daughter of Charlotte Waring Atkinson.
Yes.
And it follows her journey. It's a time slip novel for younger readers. Did you actually have a whole bunch of research done already? It's called The River Charm too, by the way.
I did. So I had that particular book just focused on a very short amount of time. It was about the 1840s, around about the time that Charlotte fled her second husband, about the time they went down into down the Marilla Pass into this wilderness, and then went to Sydney. So it was quite a short time out of Charlotte's life. So I didn't know anything about her childhood. I didn't know very much about other parts of her later life, but I focused on that time. So I transcribed Charlotte's journal then, which took me weeks and weeks. And so it was kind of, I had certain things of that period. But in the end, Kate, I wrote about the shipboard journal and her journey out. But Kate wrote, we decided that would be best if Kate wrote the chapters that focused on what I had already written in The River Charm, so that I wasn't rewriting it. So we were having fresh eyes looking at it in the context of her whole life. So, yes, but I was lucky that I had actually done so much. Like, again, last time I got lost down rabbit holes and spent months researching it, and absolutely loved revisiting it and digging it all out.
Oh, that's just wonderful. So the River Charm actually is a fictional follow-on from this book. So if you really love searching for Charlotte and you're looking for more, go and get the River Charm and have a read of that. And I believe you've got a new book coming out in March 2021, Belinda, as well, The Golden Tower, so another time slip fantasy. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's my publisher was very patient waiting for it because it arrived to her a couple of years later than it should have. But it is it's a fantasy, so it has magical elements and flying horses and all these wonderful things. And it's inspired by a trip I did to Italy about 4 years ago with my family, and I just fell in love with Italy and Renaissance Italy and the history of strong women and the fairy tales and the folklore. And I was wandering in the streets of the Trastevere in Rome, and my name's Belinda Murrell, and there was this little street called Mazzamorelli, and I said to the kids, "Oh, there's a street named after us." And then we discovered that the Mazzamorelli were these little tiny, like little brownies, little Italian goblins or fairy folk. I went, "Oh, and we are Italian fairy folk," and so I had to inspired an element of the book. So it's got this magical element of these folk tales of the Mazzamorelli.
Oh, that's just wonderful. I'm really looking forward to that. If people want to keep up with what you're putting out and, your next new releases and things, Belinda, where's the best place for them to go follow you online?
So I'm on Facebook, Belinda Murrell, or I've got a website, www.belindamurrell, and also on Instagram. So
excellent.
Belinda _Murrell, I think, yes.
And Kate, you've got a course that I'm dying to get into called History, Mystery and Magic. You do a little bit of work with the Australian Writers Centre, who I absolutely love. I did my freelance feature writing course through them, and they gave me the courage to get a start. So that's coming up. I think is that in February?
I think so. Though I teach it a lot with the Australian Writers Centre, so I've got the Story Doctor course coming up next year as well, and also Plotting and Planning, I think, is in March. So
wonderful.
Lots of lovely courses.
Absolutely. And Kate and I are doing a course together next year. We're teaching down in the Southern Highlands near where Charlotte lived, and we're doing a course. I think it's 7 nights, 7 days, where we're talking about drawing on true life, using family stories, true life stories, and writing from truth and from real life.
Fantastic. Are you booked out for that yet?
It hasn't been opened up yet.
Yeah.
So it'll be going live fairly soon, but we expect it will book out fast because it's going to be so gorgeous down in the Southern Highlands, a residential retreat. You get to do yoga in the morning and have massages and eat
these beautiful hand-picked things from the garden. And it's at this beautiful farm called Springfield Farm down in the Southern Highlands, which is divine. I can't wait to go myself.
Oh, that's wonderful. All right, well, we'll have to keep an eye on your social media links to when that comes out, and I'll share it on the page too. Kate, I'll pop into the comments if you guys are interested in looking at Kate's courses or anything like that. I'll put a link in the comments for you to follow up with. I really do highly recommend the AWC, and obviously, Kate, I'm sure you're a wonderful, wonderful mentor. And also, I'm actually, since we last spoke, I'm working my way through your backlist. I'm currently reading The Beast Garden, and can I just say how much I love this book so much? I get so upset getting pulled away from it. It's I guess a story a Beauty and the Beast retelling set in Nazi Germany, and it is just so moving, and the way that you use music and this lyrical language that you use to just sweep me away. So I'm absolutely loving that. So this is an older Kate Forsyth book. So let me know in the comments if you've read this one or what your favorite one is. What I should read next, because I'm thinking I might go on to Bitter Greens, but this one just caught me first.
Thank you, Annie. Oh, you're so lovely. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, my pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on, guys. It's been really a great pleasure to talk to you. Next week, we're going to be joined by Joanna Nell. So we're going to discuss the benefits of uplit literature, which is just uplifting lit, so we'll get into what that means next week. Why elderly characters make fantastic heroes and heroines. They're just so delightful and entertaining. And the positive aging movement, of course, and her latest novel, which is A Great Escape from Woodlands Nursing Home. So I'm really looking forward to that. Thanks so much for joining us, Kate and Belinda. You've been absolutely wonderful and again, so fascinating.
Thanks, Annie. It
Thank
was a pleasure
you,
to be on the
Annie.
show.
And thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
No problem. Have a great night, everyone. Bye, guys.